Let's have a hand for Raven, Kendall, and Mark Antony. And thank you all for staying. Wow. There's a lot there. Yeah, I guess we can start with just general impressions of the film. Was there like a scene or a choice that an actor made or that the director made that you thought was interesting? Or
I'm thinking about the dog at the train station. Sidney Poitier, when he first gets to the train station, the dog like follows him into the waiting room, and then there's a long shot where we see the dog enter, and then right after that we see the sheriff enter to come and talk to Sidney Poitier, and I think I don't know, the visualization in that moment really stuck out to me, beyond all the other issues with the film. But yeah.
anyone?
I truly thought, watching it, I was like, this is very entertaining. These actors are phenomenal. These shots are great. But I could see, like, exactly what James was talking about, you know? Like, I could see the problems in the film. I could see that a lot of it was like, that doesn't make sense. Or, like, especially the end for me, the kiss at the end. I was like, what? He's still racist. He still called you the N-word multiple times. And now what? He's not? Like, you know, I could see why James would walk away and feel like, what the hell did I just watch?
Yeah, the cast fully committed to, you know, what a lot of which didn't make sense. But yeah, especially towards the end, Poitier, like the decisions he made where he just like walked out into the night by himself.
Yeah, got out of the car by himself.
You know,
and
after
was like,
that
good
day,
night.
he had almost been killed by 4 white men. You know, it's kind of like,
A black man wouldn't do that.
yeah.
That moment stood out for me too when he walked out into the night. I was really, that was like one that stood out to me as when I really questioned a moment. But something that is staying with me is the leaning into humor with the film, that choice, and that's something I'm thinking a lot about. That choice in the script to like try to find humor in the moments. Of course, like thinking about James Baldwin, how he's wrestling with the film too. It's interesting to like hold both of those, like because to your point too, I do find the film entertaining, but there are also moments where I'm like, it's humorous, but also why am I laughing? You know, and I also found myself struck by some of the shots in the film, like where there's movement in the background, especially there's one where there's sparks going.
Yeah.
With the sheriff and in the background, the sparks going, and so there are a lot of moments like that that I found just the frame was interesting.
Yeah, Haskell Wexler's cinematography is really interesting. Both, if I can say, Raven and I were here this week when it was a Hammer event. Walter Murch was here, who you may know is like a really famous editor, and he told some stories about Haskell Wexler and that he got fired a lot because he was very, I don't know, would you say opinionated, or he just would not compromise with directors. He was talking about Coppola. But anyway, yeah, I thought this time when I watched it, I really noticed the close-ups and particularly the work that Poitier is doing with his face. Like there's so many, and with his physical acting, like he's doing so much. You know, even just that scene where he's locked up, I guess the second time, and he's sitting there with like his leg up and like in the shadow of the crossbars of the jail. I was just like, wow. I mean, there's a lot to talk about in this film. Yeah, I mean, did you all the slap? I mean, I feel like we need to talk about that. I don't know what there is to say about it, although I would say I loved the reaction in here. That was really satisfying to hear. I remember my aunt who's like in her 70s. Like, I remember somehow we were talking about this movie, and all she had to say about it was the slap. You know, like there were black people who just went to see it for that. You know, I don't think Jewison knew that was going to be a draw, but it was just because it was so rare to see something like that happen in 1967 on screen. I definitely would have bought a ticket. Yeah, but I also want to talk about Baldwin, and I'll go back to you, Raven, because I know that I found this, I read this quote that you say, I often return to James Baldwin's quote, "It took many years of vomiting up all the filth that I've been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on the earth as though I had the right to be here." And I wonder if you could just talk about like the first time you encountered Baldwin and sort of what his writing has meant to you.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that quote. I don't know, I can't remember exactly the first time I encountered his work. It had to have been in high school likely, or middle school, but I feel like it was high school. And I just find his work, and that quote in particular I hold so close. I feel his work really, and when I think about his words, and I'm feeling moved to speak in particular about that quote, it's like it really almost, it's a guiding light to me looking at deeper layers of myself in a lot of ways and things that I could, like even hearing his words in the beautiful readings on this film, it's like the way he penetrates, you know, it's so, his words are so incisive, and so it inspires me to, and opens doorways for me into looking at things and myself in new ways, and I find that's what his work does for me.
Yeah. Do you, Mark, Antony, and Kendall, were there any parts of this script or the other scripts, since we're closing this thing down tonight, is there anything that, you know, having performed Baldwin now multiple times, that stands out to you, or anything you're taking away from having walked in his words?
I'll say that Baldwin is saying everything that we're thinking, but that we can't say, or we don't have the ability, the vocabulary to really look at a film against the backdrop of American history, and be able to be vulnerable. You know, I think the vulnerability in his words speaks a lot to what could be called the Negro experience in America. I won't speak for everyone, but I think there's a lot of truth that lies in his tone and what he chooses to highlight about all these films.
Yeah, for me, doing this event, I've realized how like impactful movies were at that time. You know, like now it's like we have so much content and so many movies. It's like most of them aren't impactful. I hate to say that. I'm an actor, you know what I mean? Like I'm in this, like I like movies, I do.
No, it's true.
But most of them, like we aren't watching them on these giant screens. It's not the first time we saw a white man get slapped. You know what I'm saying? It's like they mattered back then, and like they really changed the world, and they really changed people's opinions about things and people's views on like, you know, whole pockets of people, you know what I'm saying? So doing this event and hearing his words and how they affected him, and not only him, but the rest of America, and seeing where we ended up now, it's, I don't know, it's just interesting to me how, it's interesting to me. Yeah.
Here we are in the age of mid, as they say.
Here we are. Yeah,
I don't know if
right.
that's true, but I honestly really believe you all should check out Raven's film All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt, because it is a breath of fresh air and just beautifully rendered. So go find that. We're gonna open it up for brief comments and questions. Questions preferred, but
Well, before that, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. Giving us the space. It's really nice.
Thank you, Kendall. It's very nice of you. Yeah, I mean, selfishly, I just really did this for myself. So thank you, UCLA Film and Television Archive.
I'm so curious to read the Exorcist essay.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading. It's the title track for the book, The Devil Finds Work. So, yeah, and I'll just say, I meant to say this earlier, the context of a long time ago, I was trying to create this podcast about the friendship of Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. So I read both Sidney Poitier's memoir and Harry Belafonte's memoir. And one of the things is during this time with this film, it was sort of towards that, like the pinnacle, this side of the pinnacle of his career. And then I think he went on to make Guess Who's Coming to Dinner after this, but he was being called like an Uncle Tom in the pages of the New York Times around this time. He was also, so he was highly aware of like how he was perceived to be the palatable black man for white audiences. Like, and I can't help but think that him making the condition of the slap was part of that. Like, and what would that movie have been without that? Like it just wouldn't have been the same. So yeah, I guess this movie kind of made me have a lot of empathy for him because, he was the first and it was really hard to navigate. One of the things he said is like, he learned that the only power he had was no. Like he couldn't control what people gave him, what parts, he was offered, but he could say no to things. And I guess by this time he also knew he needed to negotiate a little bit more. But yeah, I think he's just an interesting figure because you can really see the conflict within him. Like he's trying to make these artistic choices within something that is very mixed, right? It's not being, to Baldwin's point, really truthful, but he's trying to make something of it. And I think a lot of the history of black actors in Hollywood is that. I would say the majority of cinematic history when it comes to black actors is that. And I think Baldwin, this is one of the things he does really well in The Devil Finds Work. There's even more passages in the book that we didn't get to because I tried to only pick movies he kind of liked because of what we do here at an archive. We're not trying to take down movies, but if you read it, for example, Lady Sings the Blues, he really did not like. But that's also the passage where you get the famous quote of, what the black actors managed to do is create moments, indelible moments. Anyway, I have a lot to say about this, but I would like to hear you all. If anyone has a question or a brief comment, and the mic will come to you, so just hold on a second. There's one in the back first.
You all talked about the kiss at the end, but not about the foreplay scene before that. And I wonder if what you all thought about the scene where the sheriff and Tibbs are together and talking about how lonely they are and talking about how neither one of them are married. Am I looking at that through 2025 eyes, or is there a subtext there?
I think Baldwin would definitely say yes.
I think there was a moment when he was pouring the bourbon and their eyes met. I was like, hold on a second. Is this 2025? And then obviously he had to leave right away after that scene. So I'd hesitate to say that that was possible at that time to show that type of those feelings for each other that they may have had. But yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, I think that scene was just to equalize them both, which is like to humanize the racist. You know, is how I saw that. So you can sympathize for him. Like, he's lonely, so yeah, he's racist, but he's lonely. Aw, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and the hardest thing to really metabolize in 2025 is how all of these white people just can't conceive of a man like him, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like very awkward because it's like dumb, you know? It's just very ignorant. But, you know, in the way that he withstands that or sort of, you know, suppresses, I would say, you know, his reaction to all of that. But even in that intimate moment where they come the closest to like connecting, he steps over whatever the sheriff perceives the line is and says, "Don't think you're equal to me." You know, they just went right up to the line, right? And then it ended. You have a reaction to that, sir?
No, it's another question.
Well, let's try and move it around. I'm sure it's a very good one. There's someone down here had a question.
Hi, it's Jocelyn.
Oh, Jocelyn, how are you? We'll be doing a great program on Jocelyn's book in October, so look out in the newsletter for that.
No, it's so good to see you. This is
You
thrilling to
too.
me. But anyway, I actually had the same moment that I wanted to talk about because it's my favorite scene in the film, because for me it is the moment when the sheriff has this monologue of interiority, you know, and it is that threat of black interiority at that point. Like, that's, to me, it's the most frightening scene in the film, really, because it's Poitier's character saying, "I do that too," and that become, to me. So when I think about like Kevin Quashie's book, Sovereignty of Quiet, that's the quiet moment. That's the quiet moment instead of the slap. To me, they're kind of the reverse moments in the film, and I actually really love that scene. But I wanted to ask you all about the crazy choreography with the widow. It's a dance, really. That strange. I mean, like, it's such a strange choice, the way they are physically with one another. I was just really interested to see what you guys thought about the physicality in that scene.
You mean like him when he grabbed the widow?
Yeah, I mean, they you know how they
Touch hands.
they touch and almost don't touch, and it's almost like contact improv or something.
Right,
It's really
right.
interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking about if they were in Philadelphia, that hesitation to make contact would have not have happened. But specifically because they're in this place in America, like her revealing herself to him and him being willing to help her in that way, it does feel awkward. And I think on top of that, there's the obvious tension of him being a black man and her being a white woman, and her having money and him, well, just being a black man in the end.
Yeah, I feel moved to respond to your first point around the scene with the sheriff and the interiority. I really love the book, The Sovereignty of Quiet. I really recommend it if folks haven't read it. And I feel like I agree with you. I feel like that's the most intimate scene in the film to me. And I feel that in a scene, it's so interesting to me because what makes it, for me, it's so intimate, and I'm so interested in when the sheriff interrupts it with the line where he says, "Don't, something black boy," or
Yeah. And pity.
yeah. And so it's so speaking man to man. So like race aside, we're human to human, man to man. And it's so clear that that line is there to disrupt that. And so that's what's really interesting to me about that scene, and why the previous question, I was sitting with it because there is an intimacy in that scene to me, and that it's so clear that the sheriff wanted to disrupt that.
Yeah. I have a question down here, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you all again. And thank you for that first question, because I think it sort of set the table for, at least in my mind, this idea of Black people and white people, specifically in the South, being inextricably linked and intimate, but sort of having to deflect that intimacy to foreground power, and in this sense, the power of the white man, if you will. I was really surprised and taken aback by Baldwin's take on the film, although I understand it, because I think, for me, it is quite cynical in a way, because I feel like the film blatantly exhibits this idea that unless white people are able to see their own humanity, then they're going to not be able to exist. And the first question about the framing when the brother is shot, and Jewison does it so many times with the car, he falls and his head literally is resting against the bumper with the Confederate flag as he's dying. So I thought that had to be a deliberate choice. And then I saw Portier in the film, and I looked up other films that came out in 1967. So you had The Graduate, you had Cool Hand Luke, you had other movies like that. To me, he was like a Black superhero in this movie. That's how when he's fighting the guys in the warehouse, the slap, in the context of 67, particularly given what happened between 63 and 68, I thought the movie was amazing and infuriating, actually. So. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to return to the reading with Baldwin, I almost didn't want to do that one, but I feel like it's very emblematic of Baldwin's mind, in that he sometimes goes on these tangents and you're like, when is this going to come back? Like we just watched In the Heat of Night. Why is he talking about Birth of a Nation? And then he connects the sheriff into that. And I think a lot about how Birth of the Nation was the first Hollywood blockbuster, and it really was like the blueprint for cinema in America. And I wasn't going to show it here, but if you want to see it, you can find it online. But I do think it's important, just because of what we do here as an archive, is to talk about the importance of this film, because it's like I said, it's very central to what American cinema became. But I think it's very, I just think it's interesting how he connects that with this film, because there are connections, in my mind at least, especially to your point, Jocelyn, about the way he physically had contact with the two white women in the movie. Like, even when he picked up the pregnant girl, I was like, don't do that. Like, my internal reaction was like, do not touch her. Like, leave her. Like, just walk outside. Like, go back with with Bayer Richards' character. Like, go with her. It's kind of what I was feeling. But yeah, I do think there's the rapacious Gus, who's like the villain who tries to rape a white woman in Birth of the Nation. There's that hint towards that in this movie, in the way that he's dealing with the white women in the movie. I also think, I don't know if this is true, but my sense is like the casting of that teenage girl, to me, she read as Creole. They could have picked, a very obviously blonde white lady, but they didn't. And I would be surprised if that was an accident. Okay. Let me make this appear the last question. Wait for the mic, please.
This is great to hear Baldwin's words. I've seen this film before, but I hadn't heard Baldwin's essay on this. But I was just curious what you guys might have thought about that. I think Baldwin critiqued it, but the moment where he like befriends Harvey and they talk about getting him a cheeseburger, and this kind of like all of a sudden he's like, I like you, even though like I was racist 5 minutes ago. But like this I know it like furthers the plot that he discovers that he needs to see the woman who's providing abortions. But I was just curious what you guys, did that feel like it was earned? Did it just feel like, oh, that's just so convenient? But then it started making me think about like other moments in the film where like, despite the sheriff's obvious racism, he starts to trust him more and more. And I think that's what fascinates me most about this film, is like the intersubjective relationship between these two men who come from such different perspectives, and yet they're both in the eyes of the law, and like what the sheriff is constantly trying to like fight against this idea that like he's not in the law, but he is. And like the whole thing about the badge and like showing people the badge and like, oh, now it's like a symbol of like, now I'm like one of them. And so I don't know. And I've just been thinking of, so that, and then separately, this is getting big, but like, I'm just like thinking about like, what would James Baldwin think about a film like Get Out? And like the progress that has been made, and like seeing like racism as like this horrifying thing in a horror film. And like, I'm sure he'd have critiques of that, but like, there's just this, I've been thinking about that moment in Get Out where like he takes the picture and like he snaps out of the whole plantation mindset. And like in that film, I think Poitier in this film improvised the moment where he slaps Endicott back. Pretty sure it's an improv. But I don't know, these two moments are like swimming around in my brain. That's a lot to respond to, sorry. But just like maybe talk about the first part of that.
Yeah, the first suspect, and how did that read for folks?
I thought what they was gonna do with the Harvey character was show how equal black people and poor white people are. How classism is and class is really the great equalizer. But they didn't do that. It was just like, oh, we're friends now, you know? And I thought truly all of the white people in this movie were racist, and then suddenly like Sydney likes them, and I didn't understand that. It kind of just felt like none of the friendships were earned, especially like with the cop, but also with that guy, because it was like, what are you doing wearing white man's clothes? And it's like, bro, what are you wearing? You know what I'm saying? That's why I thought it was gonna be commentary on like classism, but it wasn't that. So I don't know.
Yeah, the only white people who aren't racist are the people from the North, Mrs. Colbert and the staff, the guy who says that Endicott probably did it, which, you know, is reinforcing, you know, sort of this idea that we have that somehow the North is more progressive than the South, which we know to not be the case. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I don't think it was earned. I mean, I believed it within the context of the film. But yeah, it's hard to believe, I guess my faith in, you know, white people in that context in that time would be pretty low. So, and the whole, you know, thing about racism when it comes to working class poor whites is that the reason racism, you know, proliferated the way that it did is because it gave them something to feel like they had an edge up on black people, or they were up in the world. I'm not gonna try to guess what Baldwin would say about Get Out. I would love to know, but I don't think we will, unless you know something I don't.
I guess for me, for the scene with the cheeseburger, I didn't really think Sydney was actually smiling genuinely.
Yeah.
I guess I never thought it was like a real friendship. I did think the prisoner, I can't remember his name, I think he was very excited about that cheeseburger. And it reminded me of someone who, there are a lot of people, I mean, I'm from the South, and there are a lot of folks I've encountered who feels like they have prejudice or racism because they've been told they should have prejudice or racism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, that's like the flimsy foundation of it all. That for me was like, I felt that in that scene of this here someone who has never really, and look, I feel he's still racist, but it's like he's seeing there's someone who can, he's seeing him, you know what I mean? Like through this interaction, there's like something that's shifted for him, like seeing, oh, this is someone, not this is a black man who I might call boy or something, you know? And it was also off of that question, like the slap scene, something that's staying with me is the choice to stay on the white male character. I can't remember his Endicott.
Endicott, yeah.
When he's crying. I'm really curious about, and I get it. I also understand, like I know what that choice, like the audience is speaking to too, because it's giving him layers or depth in that moment by staying on him and seeing him crying. But it's also interesting because literally a few moments before he was saying, I could have had you shot, you know? And so I'm really interested about the layers of that moment of, because I think staying on him crying is violent in a way too.
Yeah, and this time watching it, the man who worked for him giving him that look also was kind of interesting on the way out. It's like, oh, did he suddenly get religion, you know, after working for this man?
And I'm like, are you about to be
did
fired?
you not know this was how your
Right.
boss was?
I know, yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the moment, but that's just another. I wish you could watch this movie and kind of do a tally for this felt true, this didn't feel true, and I wonder what the addition would be. But I think for me, like Baldwin said, like he used the word virility, but I would say, the truth of this film lies solely in Sidney Poitier and what he's doing underneath and around language.
Completely. And just to quickly go off of that, that's a moment where I found humor with the man who worked for Indica. Like I laughed at that, but that was a moment like, why am I laughing? And I know,
we laughed too, yeah.
But then I was like, it's interesting because, and that's what I find really, that's why I mentioned the humor that I find interesting in this film, because it feels like there's more than one thing happening in the humor, which is interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is, read The Devil Finds Work. And thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate you all.